And Jason, I enjoyed your film work. I'm always glad to make the acquaintance with another filmmaker. If this politics thing doesn't work out, I'd like to talk to you after this show also. I've enjoyed my entire stay here. I came in last night. Could have been a little better. It happened to me again. I came into the airport lounge there, and this lady walked up to me, very nice, and gleam in her eye, and came up to me and said, "We watch you on television all the time. My husband and I are just such big fans of yours. Could I have your autograph?" And certainly. And as I started to sign, she said, "Do you shoot the show out here, Dr. Phil?" I'm glad you think that was funny. I kept the pen. Our paths have crossed a time or two. Back 10 years ago, it was mentioned that I came out, and you were kind enough to have me then. You've been an inspiration to me and millions of people across the country and probably across the world, not because of just the things that you've done that were listed a while ago that everybody is aware of, everybody interested in good government and low taxes and sound governmental principles, but just the fact that a group of individuals, private individuals, realizing that government is too important to leave up to the government. And came together and saw things that needed to be righted, and you did it. And you did it. And what an example for everybody. Not the least of which your accomplishments, beginnings and support, getting started with a fellow by the name of Ronald Reagan, who in turn inspired so many of us, including myself. Our journey really kind of started together in a way, you and I, with him. I was a 26-year-old lawyer, a couple of years out of law school in my hometown of Lawrenceburg, Tennessee, just being a country lawyer and enjoying life, and had a hopeless congressional campaign that they couldn't get anybody to manage it, so naturally I volunteered for that. And Ronald Reagan was coming in to speak for my guy and some others at a bigger town down the road a ways in Jackson, Tennessee. So because of my lofty position with the campaign, I was able to sit backstage one-on-one with Governor Reagan. He was the most unassuming, important man I guess I've ever met. We sat back there and talked, and he actually asked me a little bit about the crowd, and finally, what do you think I ought to say to him? I mumbled out a couple of things, I guess. He went out there, gave a stirring speech to those people there, and included almost the very words that I had given to him. He had me for life. And later on, he had me for a lot more important reasons than that. We've gone through a lot together. You mentioned the Watergate days, and my finding myself asking a man by the name of Alexander Butterfield. Mr. Butterfield is our taping system in the White House. We lived through the aftermath of that. We lived through the sweep of '94, which I got to be a part of. And we came in, and before very long, we were able to balance the budget and pass welfare reform and do some other good things. I'll never remember my first Senate speech when I got there. It was on having Congress abide by the laws that everybody else had to abide by. A novel concept at the time. We were actually able to pass that legislation, but I made my maiden speech. Of course, the chamber was just about empty, as always, but there was one old-timer who'd been there, I won't call his name, had been in the Senate for many years, and sat back and listened to me, and I was quite taken with that and impressed. He came up to me afterwards and said, "Fred, good speech." I said, "Thank you." He said, "Could I ask you a question?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Was that a real submarine y'all used in the Hunt for Red October?" So I learned right off what people's priorities were as far as I was concerned. But of course, my foray into the movie business brought me out to California from time to time. I try to tell people that I actually shot more movies in North Carolina than I did California, but nobody wants to believe that, so I give up on that. I was a fan of Arnold Schwarzenegger from the very beginning. I made a little talk in Tennessee where I said some good things about him when he was first running, and the next day I got a call from Arnold at my home thanking me for the comments I'd made. I said, this fellow's going to do all right in politics. And sure enough, he did. The only beef I have with him is all those movies that he made, garnering hundreds of millions of dollars. Looks like he could have had a little work for me in there somewhere. But Arnold always played the hero, so it's probably just as well. I can't imagine what I might have wound up with and part of a role in one of his movies. I guess my big regret in that business is I never met John Wayne. But I understand many of you did, and right in the next room then. So we've had our ups and our downs together, and I bet you agree with me, when you look back on those up times, we probably never were quite as up as we thought we were. And certainly, if we look back on those down times, we never were quite as down as we thought we were. And that's probably a good thing for us to remember tonight, because Americans are expressing a lot of concern these days about the direction their country's going in. It's some concern that maybe we're slipping away like all the great powers have. We're hearing a little bit of talk of that old malaise talk that we used to hear about. Part of it is Iraq, certainly. Part of it is the economy, believe it or not. The wonderful economy and economic news we continue to hear, the greatest story never told, some people call it, but yet people are talking about the threats of globalization and the disparity in income and things of that nature. And my friends, I really believe that some people's proposals as to how we should react to these things is much more dangerous than the problems that are perceived in and of themselves. Some people are saying that after this Iraq is over with, we need to, in effect, come back home and close the doors and lock them and pull down the shades and build up walls of protection and trade protection and raise taxes and redistribute the income. That's their solution. They're wrong then. They've been wrong throughout history, and that will not happen. And we have to defend the sound policies that have worked for us so often and so consistently in this country. You wouldn't think you'd have to make the lower tax case again, but you have to make it every day in Washington, D.C. Doesn't... It looks like we would have come to the conclusion a long time ago that things promote savings, investment, and risk are good things. And that when you read the history books and you see the boom that happened after Kennedy lowered taxes in the 1960s, and you see 1981 when Ronald Reagan lowered taxes and turned malaise into prosperity. And you see when George Bush did the same thing again in 2001, took a declining economy which he inherited and turned it around into a good thing, and a positive economy that we're still enjoying here today, despite 9/11, despite what was going on Wall Street and the bursting of the NASDAQ bubble and all the scandals that were there. They overcame all of that to give us a situation here today where the government's collecting more revenue than almost any time in history. We live in a country where 5% of the people pay over half the taxes, 40% of the people pay no taxes at all, and yet that seems to be